Rings of Power, the most expensive show ever made, is so bad. You feel like you're watching like a high school play of Lord of the Rings, where the teachers are dressed up as Elrond and Celebrimbor. And
Celebrimbor?
That's Mr. Deakins, like the math teacher, dressed up as an elf. That's what it feels like. The actor playing Elrond, Robert Aramayo, in Game of Thrones, he played Robert, the young Robert. I didn't recognize him. At first I thought that's not the same actor. There's something that's so different. What is it? Why does this actor seem so different in Rings of Power versus what we're seeing here in Game of Thrones? It's a huge part of it is the wardrobe and the writing. There's a lot in this scene that is not being said. That is what good writing is all about. It's about the subtext. And do we see that in Rings of Power, or is it all just spelled out?
No. Now it ends.
There are many who believe today that Tolkien's work resonates with people for political reasons.
Now, I have actually done a fair few Lord of the Rings videos talking about Lord of the Rings and fascism, because Tolkien explicitly didn't like the Nazis and stuff, but also Tolkien was no leftist.
Tolkien did not like Nazis and stuff, but he was not a leftist. Think about the logic of what he's saying here.
Tolkien was no liberal. He was a conservative, Catholic, anti-communist. We have to talk about the politics of Lord of the Rings itself.
So the first argument is that all the worst people like Lord of the Rings.
And all the worst people you have ever seen in your life like Lord of the Rings, from Elon Musk to recently J.D. Vance.
The original Lord of the Rings is a masterpiece.
And I'm a fan of Lord of the Rings, actually, but it's because I'm a fan of Lord of the Rings that I'm not going to watch Amazon's version of it.
A writer who is writing about Judeo-Christian morality and Western civilization.
And it's actually long been a favourite of fascists because of basically the world it presents being quite a nice canvas for basically whatever politics you want to put on it.
And therefore, it must be altered, because the very nature of Tolkien is very deeply problematic.
Because they view the world through this fascist interpretation of Lord of the Rings.
Notice the sign in the background of this guy's room, sanctions on Israel. Those that would carry that sign often are the ones that would believe this kind of thing about Lord of the Rings. It's like, what are the odds? I would like to thank the sponsor for this video, Private Internet Access. When you browse the internet with a phone, tablet, etc., your device is transmitting a great amount of information out into the open, which can be viewed by various different entities before reaching the intended website. Browsing the internet with an unencrypted connection is like sending a private message to a group chat. Everyone saw what you sent. A virtual private network, or VPN for short, is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. Private Internet Access allows you to access region-restricted content from all over the world. For example, I wanted to see the new episode of Sherlock, which was only airing when it first came out in England. Turn on a VPN. Looks like my computer's in England. Private Internet Access allows you to protect an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. By using my link, viewers can grab an 83% discount on Private Internet Access. That's just $2.03 a month, and they also get 4 extra months completely for free. Redeem your code. I'll put the link in the bio. Go to my URL to get 83% off Private Internet Access with 4 months free. In making the Rings of Power, they were trying to update the Lord of the Rings or Tolkien's work to reflect today's world, and it creates this strange paradox where the pursuit of reflecting today's world makes it feel even more disconnected from our world than ever before. The original Lord of the Rings was meant to be a fable, a story about our world. It's already about our world.
How do we know this Strider is a friend of Gandalf?
It reminds me of the quote in that original Fellowship of the Ring with Peter Jackson.
I think a servant of the enemy would look fairer, feel fouler. It's foul enough.
That is the perfect metaphor. A servant of darkness would look fairer and feel fouler. Rings of Power, it looks very fair but feels foul. Which shows us that no amount of money can buy this elusive, intangible thing. The showrunner's understanding of reality feels very different than my understanding of reality. And in the end, it actually just breaks the illusion of any believable reality at all. And we're left with a world that is not logical. There's this method in storytelling where if you're laying out a story, if you're saying the words "and then," there's something going on. That's a red flag. It should not be "this happens," and then Elrond goes here and meets the dwarves, and then this happens. It should be "this happens, therefore this happens," or "but this happens." So it's a direct consequence. It's not just one event and then the next event and then the next. They have to logically be linked together. The response many will have is like, but we're talking about elves already. We're talking about a fantasy world, so why does logic matter? But logic still applies.
Yeah, I don't know how the master smith can't get out of some chains with all the tools there. Was he going to cut off his own hand? Ugh.
Lord of the Rings was meant to be a fable, a story about our world. It's already about our world. It does not need to be updated. That's what they're trying to do with when we see Asian elves. It just does not make logical sense that we have a Chinese elf in the middle of this battle. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. If something does not make sense in an instinctual way, we disconnect from it automatically. So for example, we have these horses. We have the entire elf army charging the lines of the orcs. This is the great showdown. Full steam ahead charge. And then suddenly we see Galadriel is held captive and Elrond, who's leading the charge, they're like 15 feet away from the line. And he just says, "Hold up, stop." And they all just stop like 10 feet away from the orc line. It's not how physics work, first of all. Think about what Peter Jackson was doing. And all those filmmakers on that original trilogy, they were all the actors, they were entering into this world that had never been explored. No one had ever done a fantasy like this in a mature adult way, in a realistic way. And they bet big. They went to location and filmed all three of these back to back. A massive gamble. There's something in the very pursuit of entering the unknown and that element of danger where the journey impacts the process, which impacts the final result. There's something within the challenges of limitations. Like the limitations add something to the journey. The limitations of the fact that no one's done anything like this in the original. Because there's something that's just not as pure about that journey. There's something that's not as pure about that story, as opposed to what Peter Jackson did in entering the unknown against all odds, and the way that the Fellowship entered the unknown against all odds. And the journey has an impact on the very process itself.